My God, I hate drugs.
I would just like to have a copy of the resolution if it's respectful enough. Yeah. After reading it, maybe if it's respectful enough and without reference to the case that has not transpired. Alam nyo kung general lang itong language ito, I could have signed this. But this is reference to CJ Sereno, and I don't want to participate in something that would encroach on the authority of the Supreme Court. Yun ang problema natin dito eh.
Mr. President, if I may, as he is reading,
Ito, whereas on 11 May 2018, the Supreme Court of the Philippines voting 8-6 granted the quo warranto petition filed by Solicitor General Jose Calida to nullify the appointment of Maria Lourdes Sereno as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the Philippines. Eh sa paragraph 1 pa lang, para nag-encroach na tayo eh. That's my problem, Mr. President. If we didn't use this language, no, referring to an action taken by the Supreme Court, maybe I will sign the resolution, but, you know, in this case, we are creating a constitutional crisis because the Supreme Court has acted within their own jurisdiction, acting on a petition for quo warranto, and here we are interfering and trying to influence the Supreme Court to reverse its decision. I think that's...
Mr. President, if I may, there have been several instances in the past wherein the Senate, while a case is pending before the Supreme Court, expressed its opinion or the sense regarding issues that were being actually in the process of being decided by the Supreme Court. If I recall, Mr. President, and I'm sure I'd like to perhaps Senator LACSON would remember, in the case of President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo's Proclamation 1017, the Senate adopted Resolution number 67 on 27 February 2006, condemning the raid and the exercise of control over print media establishment, condemning the warrantless arrest of several citizens, including a member of the House of Representatives, and other acts. We argued that the acts contravened the fundamental guarantees of the Constitution. The Presidential Proclamation 1017 was actually questioned before the Supreme Court. We expressed the sense of the Senate as they were deciding the matter. Mr. President, also,
in that case, we were not questioning the action taken by the Supreme Court. We were questioning the action taken by President Arroyo.
Yes, Mr. President, because we are a legislative branch.
That's another matter. That's separation of powers, Mr. President. I'm talking of the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court.
It is still, Mr.
It
President.
is not for us to question the ruling of the Supreme Court because precisely they have the power under the Constitution to interpret the Constitution, to interpret any law enacted by Congress. That's the reason why we are very careful during our deliberations when we are enacting or we are deliberating on bills under consideration, because we are concerned that the Supreme Court might declare some provisions unconstitutional, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. President, we are three branches of government. We are all co-equal. A resolution that castigates or condemns acts of the executive branch, can be argued as interfering in the executive powers of this government. In the same way, the judiciary. If there are acts of the judiciary that we believe are inconsistent with the Constitution, then as a co-equal and as a check on the other branch of government, it is our duty. It is our mandate to act as a check on other branches of government, not just the executive branch, but the judiciary as well, Mr. President.
Ito po isang nasa resolution, Mr. President. Now, therefore, be it resolved, as it is hereby resolved, to express the sense of the Senate of the Philippines to uphold the Constitution in the matter of removing a Chief Justice from office and respectfully urge the Supreme Court to review its decision to nullify the appointment Bakit po natin pinangungunahan? Hindi po, respectful po ba yon sa Supreme Court? Pinangungunahan natin. Talaga naman re-reviewin nila because there's a motion for reconsideration.
Precisely, Mr. President.
Is that respectful enough,
Yes.
Mr. President?
Yes, we believe
Are we
so,
being
Mr. President.
respectful for telling the Supreme Court to review when in fact it is already reviewing?
Yes.
Is it respectful, Mr. President?
Yes, we believe so, Mr. President. We believe we've couched it in such a language that recognizes the need for a co-equal to show respect to another co-equal. And I'd like to think, Mr. President, that's why 14 of our colleagues affixed their signature, precisely because they too believe that this is a respectful way of asserting our power, our exclusive power, Mr. President.
What does Rule 65 of the Rules of Civil Procedure say, Mr. President? Related to sa ating pag-uusapan.
May we have the rule, Mr. President? Petition for certiorari, Mr. President.
Petition for certiorari when any tribunal, board, or officer, ito yung sinasabi ko kanina, only the Supreme Court has the power, has the authority under the Constitution to review and even reverse the action taken by a co-equal branch. But we, as the Congress, cannot question the action taken by the Supreme Court because hindi naman tayo pwede mag-exercise ng Rule 65, Mr. President. Can we reverse the action of the Supreme Court?
No, the sense of the Senate resolution does not seek to reverse, it's not reversing, Mr. President. It is just expressing the sense of the Senate that perhaps the Supreme Court should reconsider its position. So we are still deferring to them to reconsider the decision, recognizing precisely that they have the power to decide on certain cases, Mr. President. And in this case, the Co-Waranto case, we are hopeful that they will correct the erroneous ruling, Mr. President.
Is this being respectful to the Supreme Court, Mr. President, whereas the Supreme Court's decision to grant the co-warranto petition sets a dangerous precedent that transgresses the exclusive powers of the legislative branch to initiate, try, and decide all cases of impeachment. Is that respectful enough, Mr. President?
I believe so, Mr. President.
That is still respectful.
It is strong. These are strong words, Mr. President, but they are still within what I would consider respectful. It is a firm assertion, a strong assertion of our status as a co-equal, Mr. President.
Anyway, Mr. President, I still have questions to ask, but it's already 2 o'clock in the morning, and we can discuss this at a later time.
It's 11:59. It's 11:59 now.
Under what provision of the Constitution can the Senate question the action of the Supreme Court? Kindly provide, and I'll sign right now. I'll sign the resolution if you can show me a provision in the Constitution that the Senate can question a ruling of the Supreme Court.
Mr. President,
Under the principle of check and balance, Mr. President, do we have the authority under the Constitution
Mr.
to
President,
do that?
I will go back to the point raised earlier by Senator Drilon. We are simply expressing the sense of the Senate in this resolution. If the Supreme Court acts on our sense of the Senate resolution, fine. If not, then we will have to cross the bridge when we get there. But the point being, we are not precluded from expressing our opinion as a Senate in this resolution, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Senator Ontiveros.
Mr. President, just to add to the point expressed by Senator Kiko, I'm just trying to remember the exact quotation, but former Constitutional Commissioner Father Joaquin Bernas, I think once famously wrote in a column that the Supreme Court is supreme even in its, what did he say, mistakes or whatever. So, and to add to what Senator Kiko was saying, the Senate, yes, as an institution, or even individual senators, actually, Mr. President, even any ordinary Filipino citizen, if he or she believes in good faith that a mistake may have been committed, even by the highest court of the land, respected by all citizens, then it is not only our right, but our duty to raise this point so that through the constitutional mechanisms and processes given us, that mistake may possibly be corrected with all due respect, as the respectful tone of this resolution is couched in. Thank you, Mr. President.
Ano po yung resolution?